True story. A boy vanished in 1985. What was found? 5 years later shocked all. In the summer of 1985, a 13-year-old boy vanished without a trace in the quiet woods of Minnesota. No screams, no blood, no witnesses. 5 years passed, and the family never stopped searching, until the world moved on, assuming the story had ended. Forever. But one cold autumn morning, something was found. Just one thing. His bike. And with it, everything changed. Had he disappeared? Or had he willingly entered something no one else could see? If he returned, would he still be the same? This is not a story about death. It's a story about memory. About what we bury. And what refuses to stay hidden. Welcome to Mysterious Stories, where every case hides a secret. Disappearances, unsolved crimes, and real-life mysteries that shook the world. All told here in gripping detail. If you're someone who loves stories that keep you guessing, that send chills down your spine, then you're in the right place. Hit that like button if you're ready for a journey into the unknown. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a mystery. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love seeing our mystery family grow all over the world. Now, sit back, stay alert, because what you're about to hear may just change the way you see the world. Let's begin. The summer sun hung heavy over the small town of Maple Grove, Oregon. A quiet community surrounded by deep forest trails, creaky wooden houses, and the kind of silence that felt safe, until it wasn't. Elliot Carson, 12 years old, rode his red bike down Sycamore Trail, the path behind his neighborhood that curved through the forest. It was a route he'd taken 100 times. Same helmet, same backpack, same time of day. Just after 4:15 p.m., like clockwork, he told his mom, Lisa, he was going to visit his friend Jason, just a short ride through the woods. But Elliot never came back. At first, no one panicked. Lisa assumed he stayed a little late. Jason's mom thought he never showed. By 7:30, Lisa started to worry. By 9 o'clock, panic became reality. By midnight, the police had been called. Detective Dean Rogers, a 54-year-old local with a quiet presence and tired eyes, arrived at the Carson home just after sunrise the next morning. His questions were calm but precise. When did he leave? What was he wearing? Did he ever go into the forest alone? Lisa's voice shook as she answered. He wasn't the type to disappear. He was careful, a quiet kid, but not the kind to run away. Dean visited Jason's house next. Jason, confused and scared, said, "I was waiting. He never came. I thought maybe he forgot." That Sunday, search teams scoured the woods. Volunteers, K-9 units, helicopters. Dozens of people combed every trail, creek, and ravine. They found nothing. Not a shoe, not his backpack, not even tire tracks from his bike. It was as if Elliot had vanished into the air. The media arrived by Monday. Reporters parked outside the Carson home. Headlines read, "12-year-old vanishes on forest trail. Bicycle path turns into mystery in Maple Grove." But the town knew this wasn't just a media story. This was personal. Everyone knew Elliot. The shy kid who loved drawing, who asked too many questions, who once cried over a bird's broken wing. 3 days passed, then 5, then 10. Theories began to swirl. Did someone take him? Did he get lost? Was there something darker no one saw coming? But what haunted Lisa the most was that she could still feel his presence in the house. His sketchbook was still on the desk. The last page showed a drawing of a tree with a single eye in the middle of its trunk, and underneath it he wrote, "It watches when you walk alone." By June 25, 1985, 10 days after Elliot's disappearance, the forest had been searched twice. Every ravine, ditch, and old cabin in the area had been checked and rechecked. Still, there was no sign of him. Detective Dean Rogers sat in his office at the Maple Grove Police Department, his sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on a corkboard filled with photos, maps, and notes. He didn't like loose ends. And this case wasn't just loose. It was unraveling. He stared at a blown-up photo of Sycamore Trail, the route Elliot was supposed to take. The path was simple. Out of his backyard, across a short wooden bridge, into the forest, out near Jason's neighborhood. Half a mile, maybe less. Plenty of kids biked it every day. But Elliot didn't come out the other side. Dean knew from experience. When a child vanishes without a trace, the first 48 hours are critical. But now they were past the 240-hour mark, and the silence was louder than ever. Meanwhile, at home, Lisa Carson couldn't sleep. Every night she left the porch light on. She kept Elliot's room just as he left it. Bed made, shoes by the closet, sketchbook open to the same drawing. A tree with an eye. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit on the edge of his bed, clutching one of his shirts, and whisper, "If you're out there, just give me a sign. Anything." Rayan, Elliot's older brother, had stopped talking about him altogether. At 15, grief settled into him like cement. Heavy and quiet. He spent most of his time in the garage, tinkering with his bike, headphones on, avoiding eye contact with his parents. But inside, he was breaking. Back at the station, Dean called in a tracking dog team from Portland. Better trained, more precise. They gave the dog Elliot's jacket. It sniffed, wagged its tail, and led the team confidently down the Sycamore Trail. But halfway through, near an old splitting fork in the path, the dog stopped. Confused, circling. Then, sat down. No bark, no pull, no scent. As if Elliot had disappeared into the ground. Dean stood there, staring at the spot. It wasn't a cliff. It wasn't a river. Just trees. And silence. That evening, Dean knocked on the Carsons' door. Lisa answered with swollen eyes. He said gently, "Can I see Elliot's notebooks? His drawings?" Lisa brought him the sketchbook. Dean flipped through the pages. There were landscapes, comic-style heroes, birds, and maps of imaginary places. Then, toward the back, he paused. A narrow trail between trees. On either side, eyes. Not animal eyes, human ones. And underneath, a caption in Elliot's shaky handwriting. "It's not the forest that's dangerous. It's what hides when you stop believing it's real." Dean stared at the page for a long time. "Did he talk to you about this? About the drawings?" Lisa shook her head slowly. He kept to himself. Said it helped him think. "Did he ever say he saw someone out there? A stranger?" She hesitated, then said, "There was one night, maybe a week before he vanished. He came in pale, said he saw a man near the creek, tall, standing still. I asked if he spoke to him. He said no. He just watched, like he was waiting for something." Dean left the house feeling heavier than when he arrived. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in stories. But he did believe one thing. Elliot Carson had seen something. And that something didn't want to be found. October 4th, 1990. 7:12 a.m. It was a cold, quiet morning in Maple Grove. The leaves had just begun to fall, painting the forest floor in shades of orange and rust. School buses rumbled down sleepy streets. Coffee brewed in tired kitchens. The town had, by all appearances, moved on. But that illusion shattered at exactly 7:16 a.m. when a call came into the Maple Grove Sheriff's Department. A man named Walt Jensen, a retired park ranger, had been hiking near an old maintenance road in the western edge of the forest, a place few visited anymore. He was looking for fallen branches to cut for firewood. Then he saw it. A red bicycle, nearly swallowed by vines and moss, half buried under a collapsed patch of brush. He cleared the plant slowly, hands trembling. The paint was chipped, the tires deflated. The handlebar grips cracked from time. But he knew that bike. Everyone did. It was Elliot Carson's. By 9 a.m., the scene was secured. Detective Clark Haywood, now 39 and newly transferred from Eugene, arrived in place of the now-retired Dean Rogers. Haywood had read Elliot's file, all 114 pages of it, and he didn't like mysteries. "Has the area been cleared?" he asked the officers. "Mostly, sir, but you should see this." The officer pointed to the ground just beyond the bike. Lying flat beneath an old, rotting log was a wristwatch. The glass face was cracked, but the initials EC were still etched faintly on the back. Haywood crouched. He could feel it, that invisible shift in the air when a case breaks open again. By noon, Lisa Carson was sitting in her living room holding the watch in her hand. She hadn't cried in years, not since the second year, when even the search teams gave up. But now, tears returned. Quiet, burning ones. Tears of something worse than grief. Hope. Tears that whispered, what if he was never far? What if he was always close, but unable to come home? Across from her, Detective Haywood flipped through a new version of the case file. "Mrs. Carson," he said gently. The bike was found in an area that had already been searched, extensively. Her eyes locked with his. Then someone moved it. "That's what I'm starting to think. Why now? After all these years?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slid a photo across the table, a close-up of the bike's frame. There, etched faintly into the rusted paint, was something no one expected. A set of numbers. July 14th, 1985. Lisa stared. Her voice cracked. That's the day after he disappeared. Rayan, who had grown into a tall, lean 20-year-old, stood in the corner, arms folded tightly. He was still alive that day, he whispered. Haywood looked at them both, his voice lower now. "I don't know what's going on yet, but someone either wanted you to know he lived longer than we thought, or they're trying to rewrite what we believed was true." Lisa's hand shook as she held the watch again. Elliot's watch. Still ticking. Faintly. Still counting time. That night, back at the station, Haywood pinned the photo of the bike to a fresh board. He connected it with a line to the word, reappearance. Underneath, he wrote 3 words. Why now? Who moved it? Where was he? He didn't know it yet. But something else had been left near the bike. Not visible. Not obvious. Something buried just below the surface. And someone else had already come looking for it. October 6th, 1992 days had passed since Elliot Carson's bike was discovered, and already the case had taken over the town again, just like it did 5 years ago. News vans lined the main road near Sycamore Trail. Reporters asked old questions with new urgency, but this time it wasn't just about a missing boy. It was about a returned object, about a possible message, about time that didn't line up. Detective Clark Haywood had the feeling he was chasing someone who wasn't just hiding. Someone who was waiting. That morning, he returned to the forest. He wasn't alone. A volunteer with the search team, Maggie LeClaire, a retired wilderness guide, had requested to join. She'd helped on the original search in 1985, and she never quite let go of the case. "I want to check the Western Ridge," she said. "There's an old fire cabin that wasn't in use even back then. I remember it being locked, but no one ever looked under it." Haywood nodded. They hiked in silence for nearly 40 minutes, the forest cool and damp with early autumn dew. Birds chirped, but the deeper they went, the quieter it got. Finally, Maggie pointed. There. Tucked between 2 large pines was an old ranger's cabin, no bigger than a tool shed. Its roof sagged, and ivy had begun to crawl over the back wall. The door was missing. Inside, it was empty. Or so they thought. Haywood knelt near the far corner where a section of the floor looked wrong, newer. He pulled out a flashlight, inspecting the boards. "Help me with this," he said. Maggie wedged her hiking pole under the loose wood. It creaked, then snapped. Beneath it was a small crawl space, maybe 2 feet deep, and in that space was a box. It was a metal tin, wrapped in a black cloth. Inside, a worn notebook with a red elastic band, a crumpled granola bar wrapper, the same brand Elliot used to eat, and a torn page from a children's book, The Boy Who Followed the Wind. Haywood opened the notebook. The handwriting inside wasn't fresh. It was weathered, smudged, like it had been written a long time ago. But one line stood out, scrawled across the first page in shaky pencil. "If you're reading this, then I wasn't wrong." He flipped to the back page. There, in the same handwriting, "I saw it. The tree is real, and the door opens if you're not afraid." Haywood's breath caught. "What door?" Maggie asked. He didn't answer. He just stared at the last page, where someone had drawn a crooked tree with one eye in its trunk, and at the base, a small black outline shaped like a keyhole. That evening, Haywood sat across from Lisa and Rain in the Carson living room. He placed the notebook on the table between them. Rain opened it and froze. "I've seen this before," he said. Lisa looked at him. "Where?" "In one of Elliot's old sketches, this exact tree. I thought it was just a drawing. I didn't think it meant anything." Lisa flipped slowly through the notebook, her hands trembling. Page after page, she found words, sentences, half-thoughts. Some crossed out, some repeated over and over. "Don't follow the wrong sound. It knows when you're lying. The space between time is where it lives. Don't look it in the eyes." Lisa looked up at Haywood. "What is this?" He answered softly. "I think this might be Elliot's journal." Rayan whispered, "So he was alive, long enough to write all this." Haywood nodded. "And long enough to warn us." But that wasn't all. Later that night, while reviewing the notebook under UV light at the station, Haywood found something faint. A hidden message, scrawled in what looked like diluted ink on the inside cover. "The cabin isn't the end. The map is in the dark." He sat back, stunned. Was it literal? Was it a clue? Was Elliot still trying to guide someone, even after all this time? Outside, the wind picked up, and in the dark quiet of the station, Haywood felt, for the first time in his career, like he wasn't the only one reading the notebook. October 7th, 1990, 9:42 p.m. Detective Clark Haywood sat alone in the evidence room of the Maple Grove Police Department, staring at the notebook they believed belonged to Elliot Carson. He'd already read every page in the light, but now he was following the last clue, the faint UV message. The cabin isn't the end. The map is in the dark. He turned off the lights. The room fell into pitch blackness. With gloves on, he pulled a small black light from his desk drawer and waved it slowly over the first page. Nothing. Second page. Still nothing. Then on the fourth page, under what looked like a random smudge, something glowed faintly. Lines, coordinates, a hand-drawn map. It was crude, but unmistakable. A portion of the Sycamore Trail forest marked with odd symbols, stars, trees, X's, and at the bottom corner, one word, key, and next to it, a date. July 17th, 85, 2 days after Elliot disappeared. Haywood's pulse quickened. If this notebook was written after the date of the bike being marked, that meant one thing. Elliot had survived at least 2 days after vanishing. Maybe more. And he had left a map. The next morning, Haywood returned to the Carson home, map in hand. Lisa opened the door, still in her robe, eyes red from another sleepless night. "You need to see this," he said. At the kitchen table, he spread out the notebook and turned to the map. Lisa studied it silently. Then Rayan, now more alert than he'd been in days, said, "Wait, this spot here, the one marked with a circle. That's not far from the old trailhead we used to walk as kids. Elliot used to call it the quiet path." Lisa blinked, remembering. He said the birds never sang there. Haywood looked at both of them. "I want to go there, with you. I think whatever's left, if anything, Elliot wanted you to find it." October 8th. Late afternoon, they hiked into the woods, following Rain's memory and the map's crude directions. The trees thickened. The air grew heavier. Finally, they found the spot. It wasn't dramatic. No landmarks. Just a hollow beneath 3 crooked trees. But something felt off. Haywood began to dig lightly with a spade. Within minutes, he hit something solid. A wooden box, sealed shut, covered in wax and wrapped in dark cloth. Inside, a bundle of aged Polaroid photos, a tiny flashlight dead, and a folded piece of parchment. Lisa opened the paper first. It was a drawing of the tree again, but more detailed than before. There were 3 smaller shapes at its base. Doorways, or maybe tunnels. Rayan held up the photos. There were 4. 3 of them were of the forest. Strange angles, all slightly blurred. But the last photo stopped them cold. It was a selfie taken from below, as if the person was holding the camera at chest level and aiming upward. And in it, standing behind the person taking the photo, was Elliot. Older, paler, his hair longer, his eyes staring straight into the lens. He wasn't smiling. He looked trapped, and his hand was raised, holding up 3 fingers. Haywood whispered, "What does 3 mean?" Lisa, her voice barely audible, replied, "3 days?" Rain said, "Or 3 people. Maybe he needed 3 people to find him." Haywood stared at the drawing again, at the 3 doorways at the base of the tree. 3 entrances, 3 figures in the family. That night, Haywood returned to the station and placed the photo under magnification. In the corner, nearly too small to see, there was writing. Handwritten. Rushed. "If you want the truth, you all have to come, together. No lies." Haywood stared long at those words, because now it was clear. Elliot wasn't just missing. He was somewhere. Waiting. October 9th, 1990, 7:45 a.m. The morning air in Maple Grove was unusually still. Fog hugged the trees. Dew clung to the windows. Inside the Carson home, silence sat like a ghost at the table. Lisa, Rain, and Detective Haywood had been up most of the night, going over the photo again and again. The image of Elliot, older, haunted, holding up 3 fingers. It wouldn't leave their minds. 3 fingers, 3 doorways, 3 people, Haywood had said quietly. And that note, no lies. It wasn't just poetic. He meant it literally. Rayan had leaned forward. "So if we go back to that spot in the woods, to those tunnels or doorways or whatever they are, something happens?" "I think it only opens," Haywood replied, "if all 3 of you are there, and you speak the truth." That morning, before they left, Haywood made a final request. "I need each of you to tell me the one thing you've kept hidden. Something Elliot might have known. Something that might have mattered." Lisa sat back, quiet, then spoke first. Lisa's truth. "When Elliot was 9, he came to me crying. He told me he'd seen something in the woods. A man in the trees. Tall. Still. Watching him. He asked me if monsters could be real. And I told him no. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I was scared I did." She looked away. I taught him to doubt his instincts. Rain looked down at the floor. Rayan's truth. Before Elliot disappeared, we had a fight. A big one. He told me he heard voices in the trees and that they weren't scary, just different. I laughed at him, told him he was crazy and childish. Then I told him I wished I had a different brother. His voice cracked. I never said sorry. They both turned to Haywood. Haywood's truth. I don't believe in the supernatural. I never have. But I also know this case doesn't make sense in the real world. And part of me is terrified that whatever happened to Elliot was allowed to happen, because I stopped believing kids when they said strange things. The room was still. Then Lisa said, "Let's go." October 9th, 10:32 a.m. They returned to the marked location in the forest, the spot from the map where the box of photos had been buried. The air felt denser. The sunlight barely reached through the canopy. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Haywood walked ahead with a small pickaxe and cleared leaves from the base of the 3 crooked trees. And then they saw it. 3 hollow spaces in the base of the trees, narrow and vertical like doorways carved into bark. Impossible to notice before unless you were looking specifically for them. Lisa stepped forward first. She touched the bark of the middle trunk. The hollow shimmered for a moment. Just a moment. And from inside came a soft sound, like distant breathing. Rayan stepped beside her. Haywood followed. Suddenly the hollows began to change. The bark seemed to ripple, open. Each doorway now had something inside. Lisa's, a small drawing. One of Elliot's early sketches, folded into a paper bird. Rayan's, a cassette tape, labeled in a child's handwriting. To Rayan, play me. Haywood's, a notebook, but not the one from the cabin. This one was newer. He opened it. Inside, pages and pages of writing, the same handwriting, but the content was chilling. I hear you in my dreams, Rayan. I forgive you, Mom. He told me to wait, but he won't let me leave. It's not a place, it's a mind, a trap made of memory. Then at the bottom of the last page, if you're all here, the door can open now, but only if you say it. Together. Lisa stepped back. What are we supposed to say? Haywood looked at the journal, then up at the tree. Then he understood. I believe you. That's what Elliot had needed to hear all along. The 3 of them stood together, faced the tree, and spoke, all at once. We believe you. The wind shifted. The light dimmed. The doorways in the trees pulsed. Once, then twice, and then opened completely. Behind them, the forest fell silent. Ahead, in the hollow beyond the bark, was a staircase, descending into darkness. Lisa whispered, Elliot, and took the first step down. October 9th, 1990, 11:04 a.m. The steps inside the tree were made of wood and roots, woven tightly like something grown, not built. The walls were damp and pulsing faintly, like a living thing. Lisa led, her hand tracing the curve of the tunnel. Rain followed close, clutching the small cassette labeled Play Me. Detective Haywood brought up the rear, flashlight in hand, though the glow barely pierced the heavy air. There was no sound, no wind, no forest, just a low, ever-present vibration, like breathing beneath the earth. After descending what felt like 20 steps, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Not a cave, not natural. This place felt built. The walls were covered in drawings, dozens, maybe hundreds, all of them in Elliot's hand. Lisa moved closer to one. It showed 3 figures standing under a crooked tree, mouths open, as if speaking. Beside them, a 4th figure, smaller, shadowed, inside a circle, and a line of writing beneath it. I waited for the right words. Another drawing showed a door with a keyhole in the shape of an eye, and another showed the same tall, thin figure that had appeared in Elliot's sketchbook, faceless, standing between trees, arms long and curved like branches. Rayan stepped back. This place it's like being inside his mind. Haywood knelt by something on the floor. A small wooden box, sealed with wax. He opened it slowly. Inside was an old tape recorder, dusty, untouched. Rayan looked at the cassette in his pocket. It's meant to go here. He inserted the tape, clicked play. A voice emerged. Not a child's voice anymore. Older, tired, but still Elliot. If you found this, then you said it. I waited so long for someone to believe me. The place I went, it doesn't follow the rules. It bends what you feel, what you hide, it listens. And if you lie, it keeps you. I left the trail because I heard it. The voice that sounded like rain, but it wasn't him. It was just something using his voice. The longer you stay, the more you forget who you are. That's why I had to leave clues. I had to hold on to something real. There's a door ahead, but only memory can open it. The real kind. The kind that hurts. The tape ended. Lisa was crying silently. I should have believed him the first time, she whispered. I told him monsters weren't real. Haywood stood, his face pale. We still don't know what's behind that door. Rayan looked around the chamber, at the drawings, the writing, the darkness ahead. He said, maybe we don't need to understand it. Maybe we just need to remember who he was, not what this place turned him into. A breeze moved through the chamber suddenly, soft, cold, and with it, a faint voice. Mom? Lisa's head snapped up. Elliot? No answer, just the sound of wind. And then, from the far wall, a section of the drawings peeled away, revealing a second tunnel. At its entrance, another message. This is the last turn. Past here. Nothing stays hidden. Lisa looked at Rayan. He nodded. And together, the three of them stepped into the next tunnel, unaware that something behind them had just closed the way back. October 9th, 1990, 11:27 a.m. The second tunnel was colder, narrower. The air smelled like wet stone and old paper. The walls no longer pulsed. Instead, they were smooth, like polished obsidian. They reflected shadows, but not light. Lisa, Rain, and Haywood walked in silence, their footsteps muffled by the thick, root-covered floor. Then, they entered a new chamber. This one was perfectly round. A dome. In the center stood a mirror, tall and cracked down the middle. Around the walls, 3 doors, each with a name carved into them. Lisa, Rain, Haywood. Rain whispered, "What is this place?" Haywood approached the mirror. The glass shimmered slightly, but didn't show his reflection. Instead, it showed Elliot, not current. Young Elliot, age 12, wearing his backpack, looking afraid but determined. He was mouthing something. Haywood leaned closer. Tell the truth, or stay behind. Suddenly, the door marked LISA opened by itself. Lisa stepped forward slowly. The others tried to follow, but the room sealed her inside instantly. She found herself in a small space, a replica of Elliot's childhood bedroom. Everything was perfect. The bed, the shelves, the toy astronaut, even the sketchbook. But Elliot wasn't there. Then, the tape recorder on the desk clicked on by itself. Mom, you used to hum to me when I was scared, I remember, even when I pretended to be brave. But the last time I told you something strange, you looked afraid. And then, I stopped telling you things. Lisa closed her eyes, tears running down her face. I know, she whispered. I wasn't brave for you when I needed to be, but I never stopped looking. and I never stopped loving you. Suddenly, the mirror in the room cracked open, revealing a passage of light. She stepped through it and re-entered the dome. Next, Rain's door opened. He stepped in. The room was empty, pitch black, until a projection lit up the walls. A memory from the week Elliot disappeared. Rayan and Elliot in the garage, arguing. Elliot saying, "You never listen. You think I'm just a joke." Rayan louder, "Because you act like a little kid." Elliot, "At least I believe in something." Rayan, "Then go play with your fake monsters. Maybe they'll listen." The room went dark again. A voice echoed, "You weren't supposed to protect me. Just be with me. That was enough." Rayan stood in the dark. He whispered, "I was scared too, Elle. That's what I didn't say. I wanted to believe you. I just didn't want to feel small beside you." A soft light appeared. In it, Elliot's drawing of both of them standing under a crooked tree. Holding hands, Rayan touched the paper. The light expanded, and he was returned to the dome. Then, Haywood's door opened. He walked in slowly. The room wasn't physical. It was a soundscape, full of overlapping voices from old cases, missing kids, families crying, unsolved mysteries. A voice echoed, not his own, but younger, more defiant. "You stopped believing when it mattered, not in monsters, in people then." Another voice. "What if believing isn't weakness? What if it's how you see the cracks?" Haywood stared into the dark. "I came to solve a case, but I stayed because I found a boy worth fighting for." Elliot, "If you're in there, I believe now." A flicker of warmth, a light, and then he too was returned to the main chamber. Back in the dome, the three of them stood silently. Then the central mirror shattered completely. Not into shards, but into a doorway. A faint, familiar voice echoed from beyond. "Now you can see me?" Lisa stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Elliot. And together, mother, brother, detective, they passed through the door, into the final part of the maze. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of the light, Elliot Carson waited. October 9th, 1990, 12:04 p.m. Beyond the broken mirror, the tunnel changed. The air felt lighter but not warmer, like walking into a space that wasn't entirely part of the world anymore. No walls, no ceiling, just fog. And in the middle of that fog, a clearing opened, revealing a single object. A tree. Twisted, massive, pale bark with deep black veins, and in the center of its trunk, a keyhole shaped like an eye. Rayan stepped forward, instinctively reaching into his pocket. The paper drawing he'd carried from earlier, the one Elliot had drawn, was gone. In its place, a small, smooth stone, carved into the shape of a key. Lisa, staring at the tree, whispered, "This is the one." The one from his sketchbook. The one he said watched him. Haywood placed his hand on the bark. It felt warm, not alive, but not dead either, like a memory that was still thinking. Rayan inserted the key. The eye blinked. Not physically, not a movement of bark, but something in the space around it shifted. And then, the tree opened, not like a door, but like a wound. Inside, they saw a corridor, narrow and deep. On both sides, images etched into the wood. But they weren't drawings. They were memories, projected, living, moving, like time trapped in amber. Lisa saw one. Elliot, age 10, sitting alone under a tree, whispering to something invisible. Rayan saw another. Himself, biking ahead of Elliot, ignoring him. Haywood stopped at one that showed Elliot inside the woods, talking to someone. A tall figure with no face, long limbs, silent. Lisa gasped. I've seen him, in Elliot's drawings. The figure turned in the image, though it wasn't real, not fully. Its presence felt sharp, a pressure in the chest. Rayan whispered, "Is that what took him?" Haywood replied quietly, "No, I don't think it took him. I think he followed it." At the end of the corridor, the hallway widened into a circular chamber, lit by an impossible source, glowing from within the tree's core. And there, standing near a pool of black still water, was Elliot Carson. He looked 17, thin, pale, his hair longer, his eyes hollow and too old for his face. But it was him. He turned slowly as they entered, and for the first time in 5 years, he saw his mother. Lisa froze. Rayan stopped breathing. Haywood took a step back, stunned. Elliot opened his mouth and whispered, "You came." Lisa stepped forward, hands trembling. Tears streamed down her face. "Elliot, is it really you?" He nodded, but he didn't smile. "I couldn't leave," Elliot said. "Not once I stepped inside. Not after I listened." Rayan asked, "Listen to what?" Elliot pointed to the walls. "It's not a creature. It's not a man. It's memory, alive. It fed on what I was afraid to say. The more I lied, to myself, to others, the deeper I went. It offered me comfort, a voice that sounded like you, but it was never really you." Lisa stepped closer. "You're coming home, right now. We found you." But Elliot looked at the still black water. His voice was thin. "I don't know what home is anymore. Not fully. Part of me is in here now. It knows everything I saw, everything you forgot." He turned to Haywood. "You want to know what happened?" Haywood nodded. Elliot said, "I followed a sound that felt like love, and it wasn't." The water began to ripple, and from the center, a shape emerged. Not human, not beast. It looked like a reflection of grief itself, a form made of shadow and memory, changing faces every second. Elliot stood his ground. "It can't hurt you unless you lie. That's how it feeds." Lisa looked terrified. "What do we do?" Elliot turned to her. "Tell it something real, something you were afraid to say out loud." Lisa stepped forward, heart pounding, and said, "I blamed myself. Every single day. I thought maybe if I had walked with you that day, none of this would have happened." The shape hissed, then shrank slightly. Rayan followed. "I hated myself for saying I didn't want to be your brother. I only said it because I wanted your world to be mine, too." The shadow writhed again. Haywood stood last. "I stopped believing children when I started fearing what they saw. But Elliot, you were never confused. You were right." The shape trembled, cracked, and then shattered into smoke. Gone. Elliot dropped to his knees. The black water cleared, revealing a reflection of the sky. Blue, clouded, alive. Elliot looked up. "Now, I remember the way home." Lisa held out her hand. Rayan reached for the other. And together, for the first time in 5 years, they walked through the memory that had once trapped him and stepped into the light beyond the tree. October 9th, 1990. 12:41 p.m. Light. Not the flickering glow from the tree's heart, not the dim shimmer of memory rooms and shadowed tunnels. Real sunlight. Cool autumn air rushed against their faces as Lisa, Rain, Haywood, and Elliot stepped out from beneath the roots of the crooked tree. The world looked unchanged. The forest floor was still blanketed with leaves. The distant road beyond Sycamore Trail was just visible through the trees. Birds sang overhead. Everything was normal, but none of them felt the same. Lisa gripped Elliot's hand, afraid to let go, as if the moment she blinked, he might vanish again. Rayan stood in silence, staring at his younger brother. 5 years lost, 5 years older. Elliot's eyes scanned the forest, blinking against the brightness. He looked pale, frail, but alive. Haywood reached for his radio with a shaking hand. "This is Detective Haywood," he said. "We're at Sector 7 near Sycamore West. We've located Elliot Carson. Repeat, Elliot Carson has been found, alive." There was silence on the other end. Then a garbled, stunned reply. "Copy. Say again? Did you say alive?" Back at the Carson house, neighbors stood in stunned silence as ambulances and cruisers pulled up. Medics rushed to examine Elliot. He barely spoke. Only nodded when asked if he knew his name. His voice came out as a whisper. Elliot Carson. He wouldn't let go of Lisa's hand. He kept glancing around like someone expecting the world to blink away. Reporters were kept back. News helicopters flew overhead. And yet, in all the noise, Elliot remained quiet. A boy pulled out of somewhere no one could explain. Later that evening, Lisa sat beside Elliot's hospital bed. He hadn't spoken much, barely ate, but he kept his sketchbook beside him. The same one from years ago. Blank pages now. Lisa brushed his hair gently. "I missed you," she said. Elliot finally looked at her. "I know. Are you still there? Inside?" He stared at the ceiling for a moment, then said quietly, "It never really lets go. It remembers what you tried to forget." Lisa asked, "What was it, Elliot?" He thought for a long time, then whispered, "It was everything we didn't say, and everything we wanted to believe was gone." Meanwhile, across town, Haywood sat alone in his office, reviewing the physical evidence. The sketchbook, the cassette, the key, the photograph showing Elliot at age 17 inside the tree. None of it made sense to any official system. He'd been told by higher-ups to keep the explanation simple. But Haywood couldn't lie anymore. Not to himself. He opened his notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of a new page. It was real. That night, Rain came into Elliot's hospital room. He brought a tape player. "I figured we could listen together," he said. He played the tape labeled "To Rayan." Elliot's voice came through. "I'm sorry I scared you. I always thought you were the brave one. But now I know you were just pretending. Me too. If I forget again, if this place makes me forget, play this for me, so I remember who I was." Rayan hit pause. He looked at his brother. "I'll never let you forget again. I promise." Elliot nodded and smiled, barely, for the first time in 5 years. Outside the window, the wind moved through the trees, and somewhere, back deep in the forest, the crooked tree stood silent. Its bark closed again, its eye no longer open, but in its roots, a memory lingered, waiting, just in case someone else stopped believing. October 11th, 1990, 2:13 p.m. 2 days had passed since Elliot Carson returned. In that time, no medical condition could explain his survival. His vitals were stable, no signs of dehydration or trauma. His blood work was unremarkable. He had no scars, no illness, no physical signs of 5 years in the wilderness. And yet, he hadn't aged normally. He looked 17, exactly 5 years older. But something about his eyes unsettled every nurse who entered the room, as one whispered to another, "He doesn't blink like other kids." At the police station, Detective Clark Haywood sat across from his captain, Elaine Mercer, reviewing the report. She spoke flatly. "So you're telling me the boy disappeared in July of 1985, reappeared 5 years later with no injuries, carrying a notebook with impossible entries, and that your explanation is a tree?" Haywood stayed calm. "I'm not giving an explanation. I'm giving facts." Mercer sighed and tossed the folder aside. "You want me to file this under unsolved, or miracle, or worse, hallucination?" Haywood looked her in the eye. File it under witnessed. I was there. She leaned in. Clark, this case already made national headlines once. The media's already spinning it as a survival story. Found wandering, delirious, maybe amnesiac. But that's not what happened, Haywood said. And you know it. Mercer stood, frustrated. Well, unless you want to lose your badge, this stays internal. We call it a recovery. You saw nothing unusual. You found a lost boy. Understood? Haywood didn't reply. Because deep down, he knew the truth wasn't meant for files or reports. It was meant for the people who needed to believe again. At home, Lisa Carson stood in Elliot's bedroom. Untouched since 1985. Elliot walked in slowly. He stopped near the bookshelf and reached for an old comic. Then a baseball. Then the red flashlight that used to sit on his nightstand. He turned to his mother. None of it feels real. Lisa nodded. It doesn't to me either. He sat on the bed. When I was there, the longer I stayed, the more I forgot you. Not on purpose. Like your name was a sound I couldn't remember. Lisa knelt beside him, holding his hands. But you remembered something, she whispered. He looked at her. I remembered you hummed when you cooked, and you cried when you thought no one was looking, and you told me that monsters were just made-up stories. A pause. They're not, Mom. Not all of them. That evening, Rain took Elliot on a drive through Maple Grove. They passed the old gas station, the now-closed skate rink, the high school football field. Nothing had changed, but Elliot felt like a ghost in his own life. Rain finally asked, Do you remember the voice? Elliot stared out the window. It wasn't a voice. It was more like an emotion that could speak. It knew what I needed, and it used that against me. Rayan nodded. What did it want? Elliot answered softly, To keep me, but not just me. Anyone who comes close to forgetting who they really are. Back at the house that night, a package arrived at the Carson doorstep. No return address. Inside was a manila envelope marked in black pen. For Elliot, from the others. Lisa opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photocopies of drawings, strange sketches. Some resembled Elliot's. Others were different, distorted. But on the final page, there was a list of names, dates, disappearance reports, dozens of children, all over the country, all missing between 1974 and 1989. All in forests, all cases closed, unsolved. And next to two names written in pencil. Returned. Lisa's voice cracked. There are others. Elliot took the page. His voice was flat. Then it's not done. Outside, in the woods behind Maple Grove. A crow landed on a crooked branch of an old dead tree. Beneath it, the roots trembled, and a single eye-shaped knot in the bark blinked. Once. Then went still. Dozens of names. Children who had gone missing just like Elliot, vanished without a trace in wooded areas across the U.S. Some were found, some were never seen again. Two names were marked. Returned. And now, Elliot Carson was the third. Lisa sat at the kitchen table, photos and files spread before her. Elliot stood beside her, silent, scanning the pages. Rayan paced in the living room, overwhelmed. Who sent this? He asked. And why now? Haywood arrived an hour later, summoned by Lisa. He looked at the envelope and froze. I've seen this handwriting before, he said quietly. In an old case file from Oregon. 1981, another boy. Same age, same story. Lisa stared at him. You knew about another one? Haywood nodded. I didn't believe it then. I do now. That afternoon, the four of them sat in the Carson garage going through the documents. Elliot spoke slowly, as if translating a dream. These places, they're not connected by location. They're connected by emotion, grief, loneliness, secrets. He held up a photo, a sketch of a large hollow tree, not unlike the one he'd entered. "This is in Montana," he said, "but I saw the same shape, inside." Rayan asked, "What does it want? Why children?" Elliot didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because children are still willing to believe, and belief is the only thing strong enough to open the door. But lies. Lies are what seal it shut behind you." That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. He took the drawings and maps back into his room and stared at them under a flashlight. Patterns began to emerge. Dates clustered around seasonal shifts, mostly fall. Most disappearances followed family conflict or trauma. All the children had reported dreams before vanishing, if any testimony existed. Then, in the corner of one photocopied file, he found something new. A P.O. box listed under a name scratched out by hand. But next to it, a handwritten note. "We're not alone. If you remember it, we remember you." His heart pounded. Someone, or some people, were out there. Others who came back, and they were watching. October 14th, 6:42 a.m. Haywood stood on his porch, coffee in hand, when a white envelope appeared on his doormat. No knock, no sound. He picked it up. Inside, a photo, recent, taken with a long lens. It showed Elliot Carson, sitting alone at the edge of Maple Grove Woods. Next to it, a sticky note. "He remembers too much. That's not safe." Haywood drove straight to the Carsons. Lisa opened the door, pale and shaking. "He's gone," she said. Elliot left before sunrise. He said he had to meet someone who sent him a signal. Haywood rushed to the woods. Rain followed, flashlight in hand. They reached the trailhead. No Elliot. But something was pinned to the tree with a rusted nail. A drawing, torn from Elliot's sketchbook. It showed two children, hand in hand, standing in front of the crooked tree. And behind them, a dozen shadows, watching. Above them, the words, greater than "not all of us came back whole." Elliot Carson had disappeared once. He'd been found. But now he was chasing something only the lost could understand. Something still calling. And someone, somewhere, was waiting for him to remember more than he should. October 14th, 1990, 7:55 p.m. Elliot walked deeper into the forest beyond Maple Grove, alone. No flashlight, no compass. Just the drawing in his hand, and the strange feeling in his chest. Like a rope tied to something pulling him forward. He didn't know where exactly he was going, but he knew who was waiting. 30 minutes later, in a clearing hidden behind a wall of dead pine and fog, he saw them. 3 people. All between the ages of 17 and 25. All pale, thin, but alert. Their faces were familiar. Slightly off versions of the ones he'd seen in the files. They didn't speak at first. They just stared. Then one stepped forward. A young woman with auburn hair and deep-set eyes. She spoke calmly. "You made it back, and still remember. That's rare." Elliot nodded. "I had help." The second, a tall man with a scar over one eye, added, "That door opens for the willing. But once you walk back out, the world doesn't want your truth." Elliot looked around. The clearing felt strangely still, as if time had stopped just inside its border. He asked, "Why did it take me? Why did it take us?" The third, a younger boy no older than Rain, answered, "Because we were looking for something, and it gave us a version of it. Comfort, safety. A place where the things we feared couldn't follow, unless we brought them with us." The girl added, "But it feeds on memory, especially the kind tied to guilt." Elliot swallowed hard. "And what now?" The scarred man turned toward the trees. There was a faint hum in the distance, familiar, like wind breathing. Now we choose, stay hidden, or tell the truth, and watch the world reject it. Elliot stepped forward. I have to go back, not to be normal, but because my mom and my brother, they pulled me out. I owe them something real. The girl gave him a small, sad smile. Then you need to leave something behind. She handed him a box. Wooden. Small, locked with a bone-shaped key. Elliot asked, "What is it?" She replied, "Your memory, the piece of it that the tree still owns. If you keep it, it'll call you again. If you bury it, it might let you go." Elliot stared at the box. Then slowly, with trembling fingers, he placed the drawing inside. The last image he'd ever sketched while inside the tree. He closed the lid, and the hum faded. October 15th, 1990, 2:01 a.m. Haywood's car headlights cut through the mist as he pulled up to the trailhead. Lisa and Rain were already there, waiting, wrapped in blankets. Suddenly, from the tree line, Elliot emerged, covered in mud, breathing hard, but smiling, truly smiling, for the first time since his return. Lisa ran to him, held him so tightly it hurt. Rayan stood a few feet back, then stepped forward and simply said, "I kept the flashlight on, just in case." Elliot nodded. "I saw it." That morning, Haywood typed his final report. He wrote, "Elliot Carson was found twice. Once by searchlights, once by love. What took him doesn't live in maps. It lives in silence, in pain, in the things we leave unsaid. But what brought him back was truth." He paused before signing it. Then he wrote a final line beneath his signature. "If you ever hear the trees whisper, listen, but don't answer." Epilogue. October 21st, 1990. The Carson family left Maple Grove a week later. They moved 2 towns away. Quietly. No interviews, no reporters. The story faded from headlines. Just another miraculous recovery. But in Elliot's new room, tucked in the back of his drawer, was a single page. A sketch. The same tree. Only this time. It was closed. And beneath it, written in shaky handwriting, "It let me go." But just outside his window, the wind moved through the trees. And for a moment, the leaves whispered something back.